This is part of the government's attempt to present itself as being both firm on the issue of refugees coming to the United Kingdom and at the same time be humane. So it was advertising this ship as being a very good place for people to stay, very nice kitchens, very nice facilities, and it was having its friends in the right-wing media showing those images, etc. As you know, it's been since discovered that the ship has Legionnaire's disease, which can be fatal. The issue really is that the ship was another version of the Rwanda plan, which was trying to get the refugees to go to Rwanda, and they made an agreement with that. And partly it's to do with the fact that the government has built up xenophobia so much in this country that it feels that its ability to deliver on its competence as a government depends on reducing the numbers of refugees. Rather than it's change its policies which create refugees, i.e. going around breaking countries, it would rather try and follow what it thinks is what the Australians do, is to prevent the refugees physically landing on the country, hoping that because they are treated really badly, they will not come. I think it's important to recognize that this image of liberal cosmopolitan Britain, partly it is a result of a certain forgetting of the history of xenophobia in Britain. Even during the Holocaust, when Jewish people were being killed in Europe, there were still restrictions on Jewish migration to Britain and the United States. But that moment, which created this image of a much more cosmopolitan Britain, was always contested. And right now it's been taken over by an attempt to create a much more xenophobic notion of Britain. And the sad thing, of course, and the kind of complicated thing is this, that many of the people who are the advocates of the xenophobia are people of color who came through migration because of their parents and grandparents were allowed to do it. Because they are people of color, they can say, well, we're not xenophobic, but you then become the spokesman for xenophobia yourself. If you look at the treatment of Ukrainian refugees, and you look at the treatment of other refugees, Ukrainian refugees were given, and not just in Britain, but throughout Europe, they were given tremendous assistance. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but how is their condition different than the refugees created in wars, often, or attempts to overthrow governments or to institute and support tyrannies, which create the conditions for refugees by the Western powers? How are they different? So even in Britain, it's not refugees which are being restricted, it's certain types of refugees. If you are a Ukrainian refugee, your reception and the processes that you have to go through in Europe and in Britain is very different than if you're a refugee from Syria or Libya or any other, or Afghanistan or Iraq. And I think one of the biggest problems is this, that generally the world has absorbed the stories Europe and the West tells about itself as being the truth. So if you look at the notion of cosmopolitanism, you will find that Europe has, compared to, let's say, the Muslim lands, been much less cosmopolitan throughout its history. One of them must be to take seriously the threat of Islamophobia, not just for Muslims, but for an idea of humanity itself, which is much more plural, much more heterogeneous. There is a need for us to develop this idea of against xenophobia and ethno-nationalism. And ethno-nationalism is what leads to the refugee crisis. it leads to us becoming less human because we dehumanize the other. I don't expect many positive steps from the British government, but even if the main opposition party, the Labour Party, comes to power, I am not certain that they would improve on this, because they have become so captured by this imagery. I don't see any sign that they will say, no, we have to do this. And that requires political courage. I'm not aware that there's political courage of that kind in Europe at this point.